Hey guys, it's time to check out the gaming performance for the Samsung Galaxy S5. Unfortunately, I don't have the device rooted, so I can't run the FPS meter, but I'll do my best to judge it by eye. I do, however, have the CPU and GPU monitor active, so you can see just how much the hardware is being stressed per game. So yeah, let's do it. So firstly, we have Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, one of the most stressful games to play on a mobile device. I started off with all the settings maxed out. Now, overall, I'm expecting pretty similar performance on the Galaxy S5 as we had on the HTC One M8. It has the same resolution screen, the same Snapdragon 801 processor, although yes, the Galaxy S5 is slightly higher clocked in the CPU department, but I honestly doubt that's going to make much difference. GTA on maximum settings was pretty hard to play in all honesty. The frame rate felt pretty low and in some parts it even made it difficult to control. Now, I don't actually think it's the hardware on the Galaxy S5 that's underpowered here. I think it's the game itself that's at fault. Looking at the GPU monitor, you can see the usage is around 30 to 60%. That's nowhere near the maximum usage, and it hardly ever uses the max available frequency. Looking at the CPU monitor, most of the time you'll notice that CPU core 1 is pegged at 100% or very close to it, whereas the other cores are either idle or maybe 1 to 10% usage. So the game itself really doesn't seem to be optimized for a 4-core CPU, and it definitely shows when playing on maximum settings. So because of that, I'm going to drop the settings a little here. Now, shadows and reflections are very CPU heavy, so we're going to take those down a notch. We'll leave the resolution at 100%, and straight away I could tell a big difference. The game was a lot more fluid, it was easier to control, and just a lot more enjoyable. Yes, it came at a cost of some effects, but I'd much rather play it like this. And don't forget, the game itself is actually capped at 30 frames per second, so you're never going to achieve something like 40, 50 or even 60 FPS here, even on the lowest settings. Spinning around here, you'll see a few frame drops when the city background comes into view, so if you want a stable 25 to 30 FPS during the most intense environments in this game, I'm afraid you probably will have to drop those settings a little bit more. The game itself looked great on this AMOLED display. The colours really popped. Of course, I had the resolution on 100% as well, so it was very, very sharp. It is a shame that it isn't really optimized for 4-core Android devices, but overall the Galaxy S5 does a pretty good job with all things considered and gives one of the smoothest experiences in GTA on Android. Moving on, we have the Racer Asphalt 8. Settings are on the highest available, and yeah, performance was very, very good. I didn't notice any slowdowns or frame drops while playing. The game again has a built-in frame cap, so we can't achieve 60 frames per second, but it felt smooth and responsive and was a very enjoyable game. There's loads of effects going on, debris, sparks and smoke, and it didn't show any signs of slowing down. The hardware doesn't look to be stressed too much here either, with the GPU usage of around 30 to 40%, and again the highest frequency not really being used. The CPU mostly has around 2 cores active, with sometimes a third coming online now and then, but unlike GTA, you'll notice the usage is much more evenly distributed across the active cores. Overall, Asphalt 8 was a breeze to play for the Galaxy S5, very smooth and no problems for the powerful hardware. Next up is Nova 3, and notice straight away the GPU is using the highest available frequency and nearly 100% usage during this scene. This is really the first time we've seen the Adreno 330 working hard, and I can tell you it really did feel like 60 frames per second. It felt incredibly smooth here. Now, I am actually recording this in 60 frames per second, but YouTube doesn't show it, so you won't be getting the full experience as I am, but I can tell you it was very, very smooth. Again, on the CPU side, we're really only seeing 2 cores being active here. I do wonder how these games would perform if they were properly optimized to use all 4 cores at once and spread the workload, but overall Nova felt very smooth throughout. Even during high intense shooting areas, the game didn't slow down at all. The GPU usage fluctuates but seems to be around 75%, which is higher than the last 2 games we tried. It is quite an intense game to play, loads of different effects going on, loads of kind of fast action, fast paced. But yeah, the Galaxy S5 is doing very well here. There's no problems with it whatsoever. Next up, we have Dead Trigger, again set to the maximum settings we have available to us. There is an ultra level, but that's only officially for Tegra devices, I believe. Now, interestingly, if we look at the GPU usage, you'll notice that this game is hardly using it. Around 20% usage, which I actually think it was higher in the menus, and the lowest frequency of 200 MHz being used. The CPU, again, using really only 2 cores, but this time it's CPU Core 4 that's doing more of the heavy lifting. Now, strangely enough, this game, while it felt smooth, didn't feel like 60 frames per second to me. It felt more around the 40 to 50 range. Now, I played this same game, the same level on the iPhone 5S, and yes, of course, the iPhone 5S has a lower resolution, but that definitely felt like 60 frames per second to me. Now, what's a bit weird is the fact that I think this hardware could clearly push to 60 frames per second. You can see the GPU usage is hardly being used. So again, I think this could be an optimization issue or a possible frame cap. But again, that being said, 40 to 50 FPS is by no means bad and still produces smooth gameplay, and it's very enjoyable. And lastly, we have Riptide GP2. Now, this game was butter. It felt like 60 frames per second all the way through without a hiccup. Notice the CPU cores in the game, a lot of the time it's running at least 3 cores and quite frequently 4. The usage is also spread pretty evenly between them. The GPU usage is pretty much around 40 to 60%, but when there's some effects going on, for example the water splash on the screen, it might spike to around 95% but then drop back down to around 40 to 60 again. This game seems to be much better optimized for 4 cores. Now yes, it doesn't use them all the time, but it uses 3 for nearly all of it and 4 for much longer than any previous game did. And it definitely shows in the performance. As I mentioned previously, it feels like a perfect 60 frames per second all the way through. So there you have it. Now a lot of you are probably wondering about the heat. I was playing games for a total of about 22 minutes. The device feels warm but not hot. Now I didn't notice any thermal throttling, but that being said, the metal body of the HTC One M8 does a better job at heat dissipation over the plastic body of the Galaxy S5. So if you play for extended periods of time, maybe 40 minutes plus straight, you might see thermal throttling first on the Galaxy S5. Overall though, the Galaxy S5 as expected is top of the line at gaming. The Adreno 330 is rarely pushed to its max and it can handle pretty much everything you can throw at it. The only real issue we saw here is one of optimization, but hopefully that will be less and less of a problem as we now have more and more quad-core phones on the market. So yeah, peace out.